So now time to switch gears from some of the political books, political topics, and political intrigue, and talk about James Clavell's children's The Children's Story. This is a short story by James Clavell, and I read this first in ninth grade English class in, I think sometime in 87, 88, somewhere in there. And that was, of course, at the tail end of the Cold War. So nuclear war was still a big deal. And the idea of a takeover of the United States by Soviets was still a very real topic of a lot of the shows, a lot of the action shows and movies all dealt with either nuclear war or the idea of Soviet spies taking over the United States and that sort of thing. So this was written, but well before that. I'm not sure. Let's see. Originally in 1963, and I don't want to spoil it too much because it's a really quick read. It's a very simple read, and essentially the story is. Tells it from the vantage point of a child going to school, and because it's from the point of view of the child, you never get a lot of the bigger picture about what exactly has happened, but you get the idea that the United States has been conquered somehow, and through some kind of armed conflict, be it some kind of limited nuclear exchange or whatever. At any rate, the Soviets have taken over, and now this is the school is now being kind of reconfigured, and this is a kid's day at school under this new leadership. So the whole book takes place in the course of a fraction of a school day. So a lot is happening very fast, but his point being showing how brainwashing can occur and how children can be manipulated very easily to a new ideology using brainwashing techniques. So what's fascinating about this is, in light of a lot of the things, a lot of the way pop culture has gone in the last few years, again, without spoiling it, a lot of connections to what's in this book. So very fascinating study in brainwashing and child psychology, and very quick read, very easy read. I actually got this for a copy for each of my kids so they can all think about this, because I remember reading this in somewhere in 87, 88, and it stuck with me because it was, a lot of it hit pretty hard even back then, thinking that how someone could manipulate your worldview so easily. So it's a real eye-opener even for very young readers as well as older readers, understanding how someone can manipulate that a child's views and kind of reshape or rewire them. So very good story to read, very fascinating story to read, and it's one of those that'll stick with you and really make you think about how you think, and especially how your children think and how they absorb information. Now, why am I including this with all the other things here? So I ordered this book I found it on Amazon, and I ordered several copies of it. And in the back, there is a handwritten note by Mr. Clavell. I'm probably not saying his name right. And it's kind of his final words about this book and what he thinks about everything. But this is the part that I found really interesting. He signs off here. He says, James, he says, Lookout Mountain, California as the location. Now, why is that important? Well, Lookout Mountain is a geological place in California. It's up in the Hollywood Hills there in the Laurel Canyon area. And Lookout Mountain, back when he wrote this, Lookout Mountain Laboratory was an Air Force laboratory, a film laboratory that produced propaganda films for the United States military. And Up until, I want to say up until probably the 80s, I think that was a classified location. Don't hold me to that, but it was definitely classified when he wrote this. So I find it really interesting that he signed off that this is that Lookout Mountain, California, because that would not, being that this is a book about propaganda and shaping people's minds, I find it very interesting that this was, that he included that, almost like a little bit of a code to, a little code to people in history about what might have been going on there. So I don't know, I could be reaching there, but I do find it interesting if you are into this sort of thing. The author, Dave McGowan, who wrote Program to Kill, also wrote scenes inside the canyon, or weird scenes from weird scenes in the canyon, or that's all about the Laurel Canyon music scene in the 60s and 70s, and about how this was all the weird things that were happening in that area of Laurel Canyon around when he wrote this book. So Lookout Mountain Laboratory, in that whole weird music scene, there's a lot of strange things. One of the weird bits of trivia that that he put in his book that I'd never heard until I read it in his book was that Jim Morrison of The Doors fame, who most of us think of as this counterculture rebel kind of figure, didn't know this until I read the book, that his father was Admiral Morrison from the Navy. And Admiral Morrison was instrumental in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. So at the very same time, you have the son creating this counterculture movement, this rebel against your parents and, you know, whatever kind of movement through the music scene. Dad is literally on the architectural side of the Vietnam War. So, and to think that Jim Morrison never once said, and man, my dad's the one starting this war, you would think that would kind of be a big deal. So really makes you wonder what Jim Morrison's real attitudes were and what his real point was in that counterculture, and if it was more of an astroturf counterculture. And Dave McGowan gets into all that, and that's definitely material for another book review. But anyway, James Clavell's The Children's Story. You can find this on Amazon pretty easily, and I'm sure it's probably as part of a collection of short stories somewhere as well. But very good story about propaganda, about sadly about manipulating children and how easy that is, told in a fictional form from the perspective of a child. So fascinating read, and of course, really fascinating. And I'd love to know if any of you have any strong opinions one way or the other about that Lookout Mountain reference, if you're familiar with that. So I find that really interesting.